Welcome back. This is tutorial number 6 for the exOrion Quick Start for the Project Assistant, or proof of concept. Again, those of you who are joining for the first time, I would highly recommend that you go back to tutorial number 1 and complete the setup, and also go through tutorials 2, 3, and 4 in the sequence before going through this one. You'll certainly get more value out of your project assistant that way. Okay, let's go over to our assistant. Excuse me. So we're going to go over to the action items. Now, this looks like a very busy page, but let me sort of walk you through this. This action log is very specifically designed for managing projects, and it works quite efficiently with projects small or large, even very complex projects. I've managed a project with over 3,000 tasks using this tool. The entire project assistant has worked just fine. So one thing I'll point out again is, as you recall, anytime you see that little red marker there, if you hover over the box, there's a little a comment box that pops up. Anytime you want to sort of see what that particular column is about, just hover and you'll see the information pop up. Anywhere where there's blue text, and of course not up here in the column header, but anywhere where there's blue text on the page is where you can enter information. You can enter action item information. So let me walk you through the different columns here so that it makes sense to you. Now, some people like to keep action item logs in Word documents. Some keep them in a notebook. Some keep them in Excel, different tools. I find this form, this particular setup, very helpful, simply because I can manipulate the information, the data, as needed, and sometimes it comes in handy during meetings when certain people that you need to have there don't show up, so you have to sort of juggle the log a little bit. Anyway, so the first column here, of course, is the number of the action item. This is run in sequence here. The next is the description of the action item, a very brief description. You notice here in blue I've put some instructions here to help you utilize this tool, so I won't go into too much detail. You can easily read the content here, but a very brief description of the action item. And then as you capture updates in your weekly meetings or emails, wherever, you simply add the content here in the current status and resolution. The way I typically do it is I'll put the month and the day. I'll put the update here. Ongoing updates to the status of this action item goes here. Adding the date at the beginning is a great way of seeing the progression of the action item, so it allows the owner to reread it to refresh their memory. And then what I would do is when the next update comes in, I'll put it right below it, so you can just scroll down and see the sequence of information. That's very powerful, primarily because not only does it allow people who are working on multiple projects to refresh their memory about what this action item was about, but sometimes your project team members roll in to a project and then roll off of it, and somebody new rolls in behind them, and oftentimes they will inherit the last person's action items. So giving them the information to read through here allows them to quickly get caught up and help keep your project moving forward, as opposed to them sort of spending lots of time trying to recover ground that you've already covered. Scroll here to the right. Okay, so this here unique ID, this number, the unique ID, comes from your project plan, the project plan that we took a snapshot of. The reason why we have this here, and then the ID column, and then the related project task name, is we have created a child-parent relationship between the action item and a task. A couple of reasons for that. Reason number one is to manage scope creep. Action item logs are breeding grounds for scope creep. Just because an action item gets put on the log doesn't necessarily mean that completing it is going to get you closer to the end of your project or get you done faster. Oftentimes there may be action items that aren't really relevant to your project, and that may take this individual here a week or 2 weeks working on this action item when they could have been working on your project. So what this does is it forces you to evaluate, okay, what is this action item about and which task does it support? And as you define that, let's say for example this one here is part of creating a draft of the business requirements. There's a series of different action items that are part of that exercise. What I do is I go over to the project plan and I look for the unique ID. Well, let's clean up the project plan here real quickly. Gonna make sure it's refined. And now we're going to clean it up so that we can use it. For those of you who saw tutorial in number 3, you will have seen this part already and understand how to read this. Okay, so create a draft of the business requirements. That's the action item number there. So if we take a look over here again, really to be certain, the ID number is number 4. Create draft of business requirements. So we go to the project plan, number 4. Create draft of the business requirements. Now, anybody who's used Microsoft Project knows that if you add tasks to a plan, they shuffle up and down, and the number associated with them doesn't always move along with them. So that can create a problem if you're trying to marry something to the task. So if you were to take a look here, you'll notice that this first column here is actually the letter B. That's because A is hidden. If you hover right next to B, you'll see this icon. You double click, and what's happened now is A, as you tab over, has expanded. This is the unique ID. Wherever this task moves in the plan, if I were to take this task and move it down here in my Microsoft Project Plan, the unique ID goes with it. So when I marry the action item to the task, it stays married to that task wherever it goes. As you update your project plan and the date for this action item or this task moves, the date for the action item also moves. So they move together. They're married. They're a paired series of tasks and action items. It sounds like a very complicated concept, but think of it this way. The task is the parent and the action items are the children. So a parent can have multiple children. This is of course the column where you assign someone to that particular action item. Now to simplify it for you, you notice this. Once you click once on this, you get the hand icon and a little box at the bottom right corner. And this drop-down message says, select assignee from the drop-down. Select an assignee from the drop-down list. If the assignee doesn't appear in the list, add them to the key contact list, and this list will automatically update. So what that really means is you only have to keep track of the names of the people in your project, your stakeholders, once. So because this person here is in my key contact log, in fact they were, I've removed them, so let's go back and refresh this. You'll see that this list now has only the names that were in the key contact list. So I'll change this over to Joe Smith, and I'll change this over to Susan Wright, and I'll change this to Susan Wright. Okay, whatever names are in the key contact list will be names that you can select here. What this does is it makes certain that you keep track of all of your team members, but it also provides a certain degree of rigor. You may find that once you work from project to project that the key contacts oftentimes are the same people, so you'll have to update this less and less to the point where you may just have to remove or deselect some of the people who aren't on the list because you basically have a very large list. So you get your other projects started up pretty quickly. You're not starting from scratch every time. So the assigned to, and this of course it represents anybody who would be supporting them, in somebody who might be receiving the output from the action items, somebody that this person may need to go to for help, this person's backup, whatever the case might be. It's always good to have two names assigned to an action item in case one doesn't show. This next column is pretty straightforward. The task, typically when you add an action item, when it's added to the log, the status is typically open at first. Once you start getting updates, you can change it to in progress. If you get an action item which is important, but it's not really related to your project, but you don't want to lose track of it, you want to save it, maybe it's for a future phase of this project, you can choose deferred, and of course close is self-evident. Now typically when I add an action item, I put the date it was originally opened. It's good to keep track of the shelf life of an action item. If you notice, for example, that maybe Joe Smith's action items are taking very long to be completed. By the time that you look at the difference between the date opened and the date updated and the actual completion date, you may see that the gaps for Joe Smith are fairly large. That may indicate that Joe either is overworked, Joe may not be skilled enough for the position. A number of different things will pop to mind when you see this information as a project manager, and it sort of helps you to evaluate what your challenges might be. Of course, date updated, this is the one I typically change. So when I do an update to the action log, I add a comment over here, and then I just scroll over here and change the date, and that's basically it. Once these action item is closed, what you want to do is to take the date that it was updated and put it also in the actual completion date. This is important that you do this. If you change this to closed, you have to put a date in this field, because what happens is when your agenda starts presenting itself and it has that section where you see right here progress of action items, it will only put the action items here whose dates fall into your date window. We talked about that in an earlier sequence in tutorial number 4. And only those that are not closed or deferred. Okay, and it does that by looking at this field. It says, okay, the completion date is there, so it's closed. Alright, the target close date, again, this is when you can't click on, you can't alter because it's not blue. And this is, again, married to the task. So creating the draft of the business requirements, that task on the plan is due June 11th. And this child action item is due on the same date. I know it seems like a fairly complex approach to tracking action items, but it is actually quite simple and easy to do. It's one extra step of making certain that you find the right parent for it, so that you can manage scope creep in your projects and get your projects out more efficiently, and have your team focusing their energies only on the activity that's going to benefit your project and nothing else. Okay, of course, a last thing I'll show you, and we had this in a previous segment. Each column has a drop down where you can filter. So let's say, for example, I want to only look at let's say Name 3 has asked me to send them a list of all of their action items. 3 clicks, and oh, Name 3 only has 1 action item. Let's pick somebody else who might have more. Let's see. Let's try Name 5. Let's try that one. Nope, Name 5 only has 1 as well. So in any event, you can filter the list with just 3 clicks. And do a print, probably a PDF is usually a good way of doing it, and send them a copy of their action log at any point in time. And it requires very little effort on your part. You can do it in seconds. Okay, and of course, if you wanted to filter in several areas, so for example, I want to have only the open ones and only the ones that belong to Name 7. You can use several filters. Again, only the open ones that belong to Name 7. Okay, it's pretty self-explanatory. And that is the end of this tutorial. Again, make certain to take a look at this blue column, blue information here. This gives you some more information on how to use each of the columns. And when you're done, you can simply just delete the content here and put your own information in.